I want to tell you a story about something that happened to Stephanie and I this weekend. In fact, it was Saturday in the park, and I think it was the 4th of July. Now, some of you may already pick up on why I'm laughing when I say those exact words, because there happens to be a very popular song from 1972 from the band Chicago. In all my years, I never thought that I would ever be able to tell a story that used the lyrics of that song. But yesterday, Stephanie and I were in the park, and yes, it was the 4th of July. And we met a man named Alex. Alex was from the Dominican Republic, eventually moved to Puerto Rico. And when the hurricanes came through and wiped out so much of the island, he had an opportunity to come to the United States. And since then, he has been living in northern Kentucky. It just so happened to be that he was sitting in his car when Stephanie and I pulled up to the park. I did not know that he and his 5-month-old child were sitting in this car. It was tinted windows. The car was just running with the air conditioner on, obviously. But the park was empty, and Stephanie and I set up for our own personalized 4th of July picnic, just for the two of us and our little dog Leo. Eventually, Alex got out of the car with his 5-month-old child and came up to us and said that he had been watching us. He said that my English is not so good, but hopefully, do you mind if I ask you guys a question? It seems to me that the two of you have been together for quite some time, for a long time. And I wondered if I could ask you some questions as far as what is the secret to having a relationship that lasts a long time. Well, I was delighted to share my experience of what I think has led to the greatest amount of success in Stephanie and I being married. We will be celebrating our 30th wedding anniversary next month. And Stephanie then shared her biggest secret that she thinks added to our success. So I'm going to share both of those secrets with you now. The secrets to our 3 decades of having a relationship where we not only are still together, but where we are still madly in love with one another, that we are each other's best friends on the planet. There is nobody more that we would desire to spend our time with, and we absolutely have had just this experience of, wow, we get to do life together. And so I'm going to share those 2 secrets with you that we shared with Alex from the Dominican Republic. But first, let me share with you a little backstory of how we got to the park in the first place on Saturday, the 4th of July. This happened to be the first 4th of July holiday weekend where there were simply no plans. And Stephanie and I have never experienced not having plans over the 4th of July, all the way back to childhood. Our son is in Japan. Our daughter and son-in-law had plans, and our youngest daughter's down in Bowling Green finishing up a summer job. My mom and dad decided just last minute to go down to the Tennessee Lake House. And I have been head down on some projects, and I didn't want to make any last minute changes to leave on a Thursday or Friday. So Stephanie and I found ourselves waking up Saturday, the 4th of July, with 0 plans whatsoever. Now, that's typically not a big deal. Stephanie and I are both very much introverts. We love our alone time. We love hanging out at the house. There's plenty of things that we've always got that we love to do on the weekends, either individually by ourselves and or together as a couple. We have never had any issues with not having plans on the calendar. But Stephanie came to me that morning and she goes, wow, I am experiencing something that I never thought I would experience. And that is, I am recognizing just how much I have been conditioned since childhood that the 4th of July holiday means that you go to a park and or you gather together with people and you grill out food. In fact, I can't get out of my head the idea of grilled hot dogs, macaroni salad, fresh watermelon, and potato chips. I don't understand why I have that craving, but I can't get it out of my head. Well, I took that information in and didn't think much of it. I went and finished a project that I had in my mind that I knew I wanted to do Saturday morning. I spent about 2 to 3 hours on that project. Then it occurred to me out of nowhere. It's like, okay, I've just finished that project. It's the only thing I had planned on doing today. I don't have anything else planned today. I wonder if Stephanie would like to go to the park. And I'm thinking, I could get her grilled hot dogs and her macaroni salad, her watermelon, potato chips. We could take charcoal. The parks have these grills that you can just throw some tinfoil over. We can pack up our blankets that go over top of the grass and set up a table on top of it. We'll take our dog Leo to the park because I know she's not going to want to leave him alone for a couple of hours if he could go with us. And so I just painted a picture in my head of fulfilling Stephanie's desire of these grilled hot dogs and this picnic 4th of July food. Now, I went upstairs and I floated it by her and she goes, that does sound appealing. Now, I will say this, it was very hot this weekend. The temperatures have been unseasonably warm. Saturday was a little bit of a reprieve from the previous 3 days, but still very, very hot. So I didn't know if she would go over, how well this would go over. While Stephanie and I both agree that grilled hot dogs and hamburgers and that does seem to be like the thing that one does on the 4th of July holiday, we're both not very much outdoorsy kind of people. I'm a little bit more than she is, but I like going for hikes in the woods and up in the mountains and more nature kind of stuff than just sitting out in a shade tree on a very hot day in the middle of a park. But this is what was available. And I'm like, I think we could pull this off. So Stephanie said yes. And I'm like, wonderful. And I said, hey, no pressure at all, but do you want to go to Big Bone National State Park? And she goes, why Big Bone instead of the others? I said, well, because I could pack up my amateur radio gear, set up an antenna, and do a Parks on the Air activation. She goes, I knew that's why you wanted to go. I said, well, I'm not going to say that it doesn't factor in. I said, but I genuinely want to go because you said that you were really craving grilled hot dogs, and I have hamburgers in the freezer. I think we could just go and pull this off. And if we're going to be out, why not go ahead and pull my radio out and hook it up? You could have your Kindle there. And she's like, okay, that's fine. No big deal. I was just like, okay. So I probably took about 45 minutes to pack up everything into the car. But before I did that, I took another 30 minutes to vacuum out the car because a couple of weekends ago we went and bought a bunch of mulch and there was mulch all over the bed of the back of her Honda Pilot. So it basically an ordeal of a lot of time in the scorching heat. I was soaking wet, but 30 minutes of cleaning out the car, 45 minutes of packing everything up because I wanted to take all my radio gear and I wanted to take all of the things that we would need, not just for myself and Stephanie, not just a grill, but I wanted a folding table so we wouldn't have to sit at an ant-infested, dirty picnic table. I wanted to be able to take these special blankets for Stephanie because she doesn't like to walk on the grass and be out in the grass. And so I got these wonderful picnic kind of blankets that you lay on the ground. We have this special, I would call it like a playpen, but it's this gated thing that we can put up in the park for Leo so that he can stay on this one specific area. Folding chairs, a more comfortable camping chair, all of the stuff, everything packed in, plus all of my radio gear, plus a cooler, all of the things. And we stopped by the grocery store to pick up the few items that we didn't already have at the house. And then we drive to the park. Now, when we get to the park, we found this beautiful, gigantic shade area under this very large tree. Away from everything else where you would normally go in the park, there was just one area. It had a grill. It was perfect. They had a picnic bench, but I'm thrilled that I brought my folding table with us because that bench was not going to be somewhere we would want to sit down and have our lunch. So as we pull into this area, I noticed there's this white car with these tinted windows, and it's parked in the shade. And I'm like, well, free, there's nothing that says we can't do here. It doesn't look like this person's getting out of the car to use this shaded area. So I went ahead and pulled up in front of that car in the next shaded area, which was a bit away. And the reason I'm telling you this is because it was a lot of walking back and forth between where I parked our car in the shade and this shaded area in the grill area where everything was being set up. And so Stephanie's got Leo, and I'm carrying all of these items back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Then once we get the one blanket on the ground and put the crate railing around the blanket for Leo, our dog, he's inside. Now Stephanie's helping me carry out the other things. We're laying out the other picnic blanket. We're putting the folding table on that. She's undoing the camping chair. And I just want you to imagine that Stephanie and I are doing this together. It's just a married couple and their dog hanging out on the 4th of July, going back and forth. We're joking, laughing with one another, just having a good time. Just the two of us and our dog. So technically just the three of us. This is the scene. Now, meanwhile, this car that I was telling you about that was there, that was parked, it's running, air conditioner on, and it's tinted windows. I'm like, I can't see inside of that car. I don't know who's in that car. It's none of my business. So I just continue to do my thing. And then I pull out the charcoal funnel and everything like this, and I'm starting up the fire to put on so that we can have charcoaled hot dogs and hamburgers. And this guy gets out of the car. He's 26 years old, if I remember correctly. His name is Alex. He's from the Dominican Republic. And he as he's getting out of the car, I noticed that he's picking up his baby, an infant. And this infant was, what did I say? Just a couple months old. Very, very young baby. And he comes over, and as I said in the earlier part of the opening of the episode, he says, "Hey, I've been watching you guys. Do you mind if I ask you some questions?" And the reason why I'm coming over here is that it looks like the two of you are a married couple, and it looks like you've been together for a long time. And we confirmed that, yes, we're married, and we've been together we'll be married 30 years next month. And his very next question is, do you mind if I ask you, what is the secret to a long relationship? He went on to say that the mother of this child that he had with him, she and he are kind of on the fence about what their relationship looks like moving forward. It seems to me like there may have been freshly a significant disagreement between the two of them. There's a lot of questions about what the future of that relationship looks like. He seemed pretty upset about it, and he just decided to go out for a ride in the car with his child, and he was just sitting out there in the park just by himself. And so he's like, I just felt like you guys would be approachable, and I'd like to ask you this question. And I'm going to admit to you that at first I thought this was going to be one of those scenarios where somebody comes up and they tell you their sob story and they ask you for money. It was, we've had a number of those kind of situations over the years, but this was not that at all. This was a guy who, like I said, I think he's 26 years old, and he has a young baby in his arms, and he's wondering, how do I make this relationship work with this woman? And or is this the right relationship? What's the secret? I can't figure this out. I don't have the example in my life to know how to make things work, to process what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing. And somehow he felt like my wife and I would be a solution as far as answers to some of his questions. And so he began to interview us about our relationship. And specifically, just one question: what's the secret to having a long relationship? So the first piece of advice that I gave him, I said, if there's one secret, and it's not necessarily that it's a secret, but it seemed to be a secret for me because I certainly didn't know this in the first few years of our marriage. And that was that it is not my wife's job to make me happy. Early in my marriage, I thought that when I had a wife, that she would be somebody who would be my support, who would do things for me, that there would be, she would be my cheerleader. She would be the one who would go out of her way to make me happy. And by the way, I'm also going to be responsible for going out of my way to make her happy. And the first several years of our marriage, and certainly the first few months of our marriage, had a lot of issues because there were plenty of things that I was doing, I felt like on my end, to make her happy. And yet sometimes, despite all of my attempts, she was not happy, and or vice versa. There were things that she thought she was doing to make me happy, and yet I was not happy. There was a lot that could be said about all of the different situations or circumstances, but eventually at some point, we had gone to a marriage retreat, and one of the things that we learned a great deal about is communication. Now, that's Stephanie's secret, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in just a moment. But for me, what I learned in that is I used to say things like, every time you do that, you make me feel blah, blah, blah. And when I heard this expressed on stage where people were giving examples, this is an example of how some couples communicate. You make me feel this. Every time you do this, you do this. And it's kind of like you're responsible for my emotional flare up. And they made a case for where in the communication to understand, it's like, listen, nobody can make you feel anything. They can't make you angry. Angry is something that you decide to do based upon what they did, but it's you that made yourself angry. It's the story you're telling yourself about what they did or said that is creating the anger. You could actually observe the same thing that they did, or observe the same thing that they have said, and it is possible for you to have them not change anything, but for you to have a different experience other than anger, other than hurt, other than whatever the emotional state is that you think has just been inflicted upon you. And when you understand that you are responsible for how you feel, and the other person, you'll recognize that not only can they not make you angry, they also cannot make you happy. And that began unwinding a lot of my beliefs about what a relationship was. And once I took the pressure off of Stephanie to make me happy, and once I took the pressure off of myself to make her happy, everything changed. That is a significant shift in how we experienced our relationship. Now, when I shared that, I asked Stephanie, I said, Stephanie, what about you? What would you say is the secret to the success of how we've been together for so long? And Stephanie said that she agrees with everything that I've just said. And so much of it came from this one marriage retreat that we went to, and everything shifted for her when we learned how to communicate. And for her, what she means by that is that she came to a place where she understood that communication is more than sharing the words of what you're experiencing with your spouse. If you truly want to experience, let's say, oneness or an understanding among each other, it's you've got to do more than simply expressing the words that describe what you're meaning. You actually have to do the work to ask them questions and confirm that they are hearing what you're saying. And she explained how this was demonstrated at this marriage conference that we went to just a couple years into our marriage. And what they'll do, the demonstration is they would encourage couples to say, okay, you just said all of this. And so what I feel like you're saying is X, Y, Z. And the spouse will say, no, I'm not saying that at all. Well, and they're like, well, that's what I heard. Okay, well, let me try again. And they'll explain it from a different angle. And then eventually it's like, okay, do you get it now? It's like, okay, so this is what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that you're saying fill in the blank. And she's like, that's exactly it. And I'm like, oh, well, why didn't you just say that? But it's the important thing is not just communicating with words what you're feeling and then expecting that your spouse, your couple, your significant other, whatever, your partner, don't just assume that because you're speaking the words that you would use to describe what's going on in your head, don't think for a minute that automatically means that your significant other is understanding what you are actually communicating, because those words may be interpreted a completely different way. And so one of the things that she says has helped her and us in our marriage is that we are very good at consistently saying, hey, what I hear you're saying is this. Is that right? And it's just been a part of our communication repertoire. Now, that's not to say that Stephanie and I haven't had some miscommunication over the years. It's not to say that we have never in the last, let's just say, however many, it's been more than 2 decades since we've had this marriage conference. It's probably been 2.5 decades. Anyway, it's not to say that we haven't had any arguments, disagreements, and or felt as though the other person has done something to hurt us. But outside of a few occasional moments here or there, we've always come to the place where we understood that what we were experiencing was a momentary reaction. And it wasn't actually that they did anything. It was our own reaction. It was our own way of perceiving the situation. And also, sometimes it was our expectations that this isn't something that the other ought to do. But we didn't actually share this third thing with Alex from the Dominican Republic, but we could have shared a third secret, is the idea of spoken expectations, that unspoken expectations can never be met. So if there is an expectation of what you think your partner should or should not do, and if they are not meeting that expectation, and you find yourself getting frustrated by that, you may want to consider whether or not you might want to communicate that expectation. I would encourage maybe first evaluate the expectation. Is this a realistic expectation to have? I've learned over the years to think, maybe before I have this conversation with Stephanie, let me check in with myself. Is this a reasonable expectation? Anyway, it was a pleasurable experience in the park, in spite of just how hot it was, just how giant the ants were at the park. And the fun part is that we unpacked everything. I was grilling the hot dogs and the hamburgers and everything. We had everything set up. Stephanie got probably about 35 minutes worth of reading on her Kindle in. Leo was chilling in his little area there, his playpen, if you will. Alex and I and Stephanie were having this conversation. It came down time for us to eat our hot dogs and hamburgers. We offered Alex some food. He says, "No, thank you so much. I'm good. Thank you." He goes, "This is very helpful." And so he ended up going back into his car. He put his child back into the car seat. He got into the car and then drove off. After we finished our meal, we heard some pops. And the pops were these sounds from across the road, across the highway from the park. There was obviously some families playing around with some early day fireworks. And our dog does not like the sound of fireworks at all. He started shaking, and Stephanie's like, "I think he's really nervous and anxious." I said, "Well, do you want to head home?" She goes, No. You haven't even done your park activation yet." And I said, "Hey, I don't need to do my park activation." She says, "You sure?" I said, "Absolutely." I said, "More than anything, the whole idea of coming out to the park today was so that you could actually experience your grilled hot dogs and your macaroni salad and all the stuff. And you got your watermelon, your potato chips, and we're here. We did this. And we never would have guessed that we would run into Alex today. Who knows what that conversation meant to him?" And then from that point, we started packing up the things into our cooler. I pulled the car up closer to us because Alex had left. And so there was a spot up close. I packed everything back up, folded up all those blankets, put everything back into the car, and Stephanie and I came home. And you know what? This is the story of what happened to us on Saturday in the park on the 4th of July. That is what I felt led to share with you in this week's episode of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show. One thing that I absolutely love is just the understanding that when I'm responsible for my own emotional state and I don't put that out to anybody else as far as their responsibility, I find that when I come to an understanding that my emotional state is within my control, and I'm not farming that responsibility out to someone else, I find that, wow, there are times when I'm angry. There are times when I'm sad. There are times when I'm depressed. And sometimes those things have nothing to do with anything Stephanie has ever done and or said. Sometimes they're maybe related to situations or circumstances that have happened in the business or in family relationships outside of my wife and I and our children, just whatever the case may be. And or sometimes they're just physiological. Sometimes I'm tired. Sometimes I'm hungry. Sometimes there's, upset stomach or whatever the case may be. There are times when I'm not in that peak, beautiful, blissful, happy, joy-filled, ecstatic state. But I also know that it's not required that I be happy all of the time. But more than anything, if I have the capacity to be happy, that capacity and the strategies for being happy are available from within, and it's not required from any external force for me to access that. This was my biggest takeaway, and it's what's helped me, it's what's helped Stephanie and I navigate our relationship in such a way where we're not looking to make each other happy. Now, here's what I can tell you. There are certainly things that Stephanie can do to add joy to my life. There is something powerful about the companionship that we have, the laughter that we share, the affection, the support. But my state is my responsibility. My expectations are my responsibility. The stories that I tell myself about what I observe are my responsibility, and all of my reactions and preferably all of my responses are my responsibility. Also, I want to express that this does not mean that I ignore Stephanie's desires, nor does this give me permission to just be selfish or to refuse to serve her or help or sacrifice for things that she would desire that might be in competition with things that I desire that compete for the same time slots. And it doesn't mean that her feelings don't matter either. It just means that I get to choose to freely love her. And I get to do the things that I do because of that love and not out of any sense of obligation or any fear of guilt or some sort of emotional responsibility. That is why going to the park was a thing that I chose to do because I knew that was a desire of her heart. And yeah, I did think about doing my amateur radio Parks on the Air activation while we were there. But it's also why it didn't bother me when she observed that Leo was getting a little anxious, that the ants were massively huge and crawling up our legs, and it was hot. And we had both decided that, yeah, going home would probably be more pleasurable. We got the most important thing for Stephanie that we had out of there. And quite frankly, because I love her and not because I wanted to make her happy, we also accomplished what was most important for me, which is to do an act of kindness, something for her that she had expressed hours earlier in the morning. That's the story that I wanted to share. Mindset Answer Man.